Hello and welcome to episode 1385 of The Sleeper and the Bust. It is Thursday, March 6th. I'm your host, Paul Sporer. Joined this afternoon by both Justin Mason and Joe Orrico. Gentlemen, welcome. How's it going?
It's going good. This is the best time of year. I'm constantly running from podcast to podcast.
Yep.
This is the old joke is once the season starts, we can actually take a little bit of a break. But I'm really looking forward to the
That's
season
true,
actually get
though.
going.
Especially April, like from March to April, or February, March versus April. It is that first time you get a break, but then that starts to ramp up too with the daily routine and everything. Justin, how you doing with the fire hose of this month?
Oh my god, dude! Like I'm so tired right now. Potapalooza is coming up this weekend. Make sure you're
Yes.
subscribed to the YouTube and you're following along, donating to Fantasy Cares through the donor box link. Cannot wait. It's gonna be a ton of fun, but man, it has been a long week with TGFBI starting and Potapalooza this weekend. I am so looking forward to my quote unquote vacation next week, where I will be in New York for Tout Wars. So not really a vacation, but at least I'm getting away from my house.
Yeah, you get to travel and do some stuff. That'll be fun. But you are also on the Tout Wars board. So even, when you're not drafting, I imagine you're going to be having backroom meetings and dealings and whatnot.
I'm running live stream, so make sure
Sweet.
you are watching the or subscribe to the YouTube for Tout Wars. I'll be running live streams of every single auction going on that weekend. If you want to hear my voice for probably like 16 hours a day next weekend, or I guess next weekend and the weekend after, like make sure you're subscribed to all the places that you can those YouTubes, Tout Wars and the Justin Mason YouTube.
Want that?
Oh yeah, right.
Find me one person who wouldn't want that, and I'll find you a liar. Speaking of great fantasy baseball invitational, I am on the board here in the 8th round, and guys, I don't really like what's available to me. I have Betts, Duran, Snell, Edwin Diaz, Wilson Contreras, Luis Robert Jr., and Tanner Bybee. So I feel like I need a hitter with two starters and a closer. And I don't know, like I think I would have snap picked Christian Walker if he didn't have an oblique. That we're hoping isn't too bad, but it's a little dicey. And then there's Vinny P behind him. I don't know. Tovar and Luis Garcia Jr. at the middle. Bichette,
I took Shea Langoliers in the 8th round and was pretty happy with that.
I already have a catcher though.
That was my second.
And he's
catcher.
gone. Oh, you took Adley too, right?
Yeah, Adley and Shea Langoliers.
Bangaliers went. And so maybe I shouldn't have taken Bybee and taken Berger instead, because Berger didn't make it back. And then just taking a pitcher, or such as Hunter Brown or Max Fried. I might just take another pitcher. Maybe I'm going heavy pitching in TGFBI.
I am. I mean, I have through 12 rounds, I've got Logan Gilbert, Pablo Lopez, Ryan Walker, Spencer Schwellenbach, and Trevor McGill.
Damn right you're going heavy pitching. Joe, how's your TGFBI going?
Oh, it's going pretty good. I'm in the 12th round. My 8th round
pick, bad at all.
For what it's worth, my 8th round pick was Vinny Pasquantino.
Okay.
My offense is Vinny, Bogarts at second, Mason Wynn at short, Ozuna, utility, Mookie Betts, Churio, and Jason Dominguez in the outfield. And then my pitching is Reagans, Imanaga, Schwellenbach, and Josh Hader.
Okay. I like both y'all squads right now. Man, do I go Vinny P? First base about to dry up too, with Walker, Pasquantino, then it goes to Casas, Steer, who's nicked. Actually, we're going to talk about him in the outfield. I'm just going by the NFBC default rank here, but then you got Goldie, Arise, who I never take, Tolia. Maybe I do go Vinny P or Walker here. Where are you guys at on that Christian Walker oblique?
I'm a little concerned. I mean, those things.
I know obliques, they're generally scary, but they're not as scared, it seems. I don't know.
Yeah, I kind of passed up on Walker, though. I mean, my TGFBI team has some serious roster construction issues. I do not have an outfielder or a first baseman or a shortstop.
Holy hell. Well, that's why you have you have a million pitchers. You got to sacrifice somewhere, right? So it does eventually catch up to you. Boy, I like Vinny P. I do. This is a pro Vinny P show, always has been. What kind of power are we going to get, though? He only hit 19 last year. He did drive in 97. Love that. Think he could do that again. Think he could even push triple digits in that lineup.
Just
God,
got to
why does
stay on the
Walker?
field.
Why does
You
Walker
know.
have to be nicked?
He had
And apparently-
19 home runs and 550 plate appearances. So
Yeah,
like,
so we can get to the mid upper 20s perhaps for Vinny P. I'm gonna take the shot on Walker. I'm gonna bet on this oblique and hope that it's not terrible.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll be right.
Yeah, we'll see. All right. We have a little update, and it's not good. I'm sorry. We talked about this guy last time. Justin and we talked about Luis Heel and how he was going to be out for 6 weeks. Now it's upgraded to 3 months. Out for 3 months before he even ramps back up. So then you got to tack on some extra time there to even get back in the mix. We said with the 6 weeks that was enough to push us out on the NFBC for sure. Obviously, we're not holding a guy who has some warts and some scariness to him in general with Luis Heel. Now you tack on the injury and it's just a flat no-go there. What about injury IL leagues, guys? Let's go with the unlimited since, that's the easiest one to say yay or nay. Obviously, if you've got limited, I think it's still probably a no for all of us. If you have like 3 IL spots, I don't think taking heel makes a lot of sense. But what about an unlimited situation, which definitely exists out there? Justin, start with you on heel. Unlimited ILs with a fat discount. Are you in or are you just pretty much out on him for the year?
I think I'm just pretty much out. I mean, I guess I could put like $1 on him or something like that, or take him at the end of a draft in an unlimited. But even that, like, especially if it's a 15-team league, which is probably the place you're most likely looking at drafting a guy like Luis Heel, like, what's going to be available on the wire after the draft that you're going to get to kind of backfill? So I don't know. I think I might do it, but I'm not looking forward to it. It's not something I'm planning on doing coming into a draft.
I think the two Mets are better investments there. Minaya and even Montas, I think are better to do something like that with in an unlimited IL. Joe, do you agree or are you going for heel?
No, I'm pretty much out. Like, I'm just looking at some of the recent ADP on the NFBC in the last couple days. A lot of the dots are in like the 350, 370. Some of them are pushing, like the latest one I'm seeing is 476.
Okay.
If I'm getting him somewhere in that 450 range, maybe I would take the chance if I do have an IL spot. If you're at the end or if you're in the middle of a draft champions and you're still doing that and you're in the early 30s for rounds or late 20s, maybe I would take a chance. But generally speaking, he's off the board at this point. Injuries are gonna find you. Don't go finding injuries.
Exactly. So with the replacement, it brings Stroman into the mix right now, but he has not been pitching that well, and I hope he doesn't hear this because then he'll just start rage tweeting at us. But he doesn't give you the warm and fuzzies anymore. Maybe he never did, but he's definitely a solid pitcher with Toronto and pretty good in his time with the Mets, if I recall correctly, and even pretty good with the Cubs. It's really just been this New York season and one of his Toronto seasons was pretty rough. Yeah, the 5.54 ERA in 2018, that's ages ago. But then last year, 4.31, that ERA is not like the end of the world, but it came with a 147 whip, which is absolutely horrendous, and a 17% K rate, so you're not even getting Ks there. So my question, stay with you on this, Joe. Stroman or just jump to Will Warren if you're going to spec on this 5th spot in New York, or maybe a third wild card that you like. I don't know.
If I'm going to be taking anybody, it's probably going to just be Will Warren. The price is very similar, somewhere in the 600s probably. Maybe Will Warren's going to push up a little bit, but generally speaking, for most of the draft season, he's been pretty low. Recently, some people are pushing him into the 400 range. I can kind of get behind it.
That, yeah.
I can get behind it. I think Stroman probably does have the job to start the year, but he has been pretty bad, especially last season. Like the ERA jumped up, the ERA estimators. It was the first time he'd ever had a FIP or an XFIP that wasn't starting with a 3 in his whole career. Went into the 4s and into the mid 4s. The strikeout rate fell well below 20%. The stuff went down from a 97 to an 88. Single digit swinging strike rate. Like I don't think there's anything here at this point with Stroman, other than maybe if you're in a really deep league or if you're in an only league, maybe he has some value, but I'm just staying
pile
away.
up some innings, stay on a good team. Justin, I got to imagine you're going to concur there, but maybe you surprise me. Where you at on Stroman v. Will Warren in New York?
I don't really want either.
Okay.
I mean, if I'm in an AL East only league, I'll take
AL East only. Get out of here. AL only league's fine.
Yeah,
you don't have to overstate it.
I don't care about either, to be quite honest.
Well, I think you'll regret that with Warren if he gets the job. I definitely think you're underselling him.
I don't think he's going to is the problem. Like if I knew coming into the season that Will Warren was going to be the guy, I would go for it. But I think
he's first man in for injury though. So
yeah,
I'm still interested on that front because now he moves to the 6. Because I had some Will Warren intrigue even before all of this. Even when he was like the 7-8 guy, I was taking him in some DCs, because again, he's going super late. If he's just now pushing up to the 400s, he was in the 500s during DC season. But now that he's on the cusp, I am more interested. But I hear you. I'm not, bending over backwards to get him. Obviously, by the time we hit main event season, we'll have clarity there to know if it's Strowman or Warren, and then we can decide from there. But I think I think we're all on the right track here. We're avoiding Strowman 100%, and then we're kind of mediocre on Will Warren depending on league until something clears up about that position for him. So let's get into our outfielders here. Part 3, we're still diving in, and we're going in kind of a loose order of ADP because obviously ADPs are fluctuating, and I did the poll quite some time ago, and I moved some guys around too. Like if there were teammates that were like 3 spots apart, I just brought the second teammate up so that we stay with them. For example, like Colton Cowser and Tyler O'Neill, who we'll talk about in the next tier, things like that. So let's just dive in. I'll usually tell you guys where these guys are going anyway. So just don't get too hung up on the fact that it's not in the exact order of the ADP that I'm currently looking at, which is the RotoWire Online Championship since the February 28th. There have been 12 drafts, which I think is a representative enough sample to get a snapshot of where we've been. I still have the DCs pulled up, and that's dating back of the last 6 because those are starting to slow down. And so, they start and they can last a while too. So even the ones that are being put into the newest data, some of those are already outdated as well. Like some of the ADPs of some, like Luis Heel, it probably still has some ADPs that are pretty high in those if they started 5, 6, 7 days ago or weeks ago, perhaps too. Some of those go really slow. So anyway, let's dive into it. Let's start with Christian Yelich. I love him, but his back does not love him back. He's got a 110 ADP. He was amazing while he played last year, but the back jumped up, bit him. He is not tracking for opening day, apparently. Actually, I don't know if that's changed or not, but I think the last news I'd seen was that he might not be ready for opening day. But he was great. Like I said, last year, 11-21 in 73 games with a 315 average. It's just the 73 games that you have to underline and say, damn it. So what are we doing here? Because this is a pretty, this is a pretty high price still for Yelich because the talent is there. After a little lull, he's gotten back to being quite good. He is playing in the Cactus League, so maybe he is. Okay, okay. He should be ready to go. He's going to DH to start the year. I know there was a period when they weren't sure if he was going to be, opening day not a given. That was on February 11th. 4 days later, they're like confident in an opening day return. So I didn't dream that up that Yelich might not be ready, but it looks like he is tracking to being ready now. Justin, start with you. Pick 110 for Christian Yelich. Where are you at on it?
I haven't been willing to pull the trigger. The back issue just scares the crap out of me.
That's fair.
So I I came actually kind of close in TGFBI because I saw that he started playing in spring games. He went in the back end of the 8th round. And so like I was looking like, hey, maybe if he gets to me at the back end of the 8th, because I don't have an outfielder, I'll take the gamble on Christian Yelich. I ended up getting sniped on him and Royce Lewis that round. So I ended up not getting him. I don't know. Back issues just always kind of scare me. And when we're talking about a guy who's 33 years old, he's got a litany of injuries throughout his career, especially reoccurring back issues, I tend to just want to stay away. So I'm probably not going to be drafting Yelich at his cost this year. I just think there's so many guys going after him that I feel a lot more confident about being able to get 600 plate appearances.
Yeah, I mean, I can't necessarily deny that. I really like Yelich. He is only a year removed from 600 back-to-back seasons too. So, if he isn't looking healthy, he can get there. But 315 last year, age 33, persistent back issues. None of that is an unfair critique for wanting to fade him. Joe, what about you with Yelich at pick 110? Is the back too much for you?
Yeah, Justin hit on a lot of the main concerns at his age with the back. You don't really know what you're going to get. I'm a lot more willing to take him in a shallower league if you're playing in a home league on Yahoo or ESPN or wherever versus if you're playing in a 15-team league with no IL. If he is your first or second outfielder in a 15-team league and he does go down, then you're in some trouble. I think if it's a 12-team league, like a lot of people are playing with 3 outfielders, it makes it a lot easier to find a replacement if he does go down.
Exactly.
I also think the Brewers lineup isn't quite as good as it was last year. I think the loss of Willie Adames is rather significant for that offense. Can they get some replacements with Garrett Mitchell, with Joey Ortiz? Maybe they can make back some of it, but they're missing out on a huge contributor. Like Adames last season was brilliant for them.
He was.
And I think that losing him is going to regress the lineup a little bit.
I think the collective can replace it, to be honest. Like I'm big on Garrett Mitchell. I think he can take a step forward. Joey Ortiz replacing Adames. You're not wrong. And that is a big loss for sure. But I think they can get enough contributions across the bottom half of the lineup there to kind of bring that up there as opposed to one guy taking over. But yeah, it's not quite the same lineup, but he does have William Contreras, Garrett Mitchell. You know, Rhys Hoskins needs to do something, and I'm not so confident that he can. So I think that's actually a hit in the lineup where I'm not as keen on it as I was a couple of years ago. Like coming into last year, I was excited for Hoskins in Milwaukee, and he put up a very pedestrian 100 WRC plus with 26 bombs. So no, I think you have fair concerns there. And Joe didn't like what I said, so he left. He's just like, F that. He dropped out there for a second. I'm sure he'll be right back. There he is. But no, I think that's a fair concern about the lineup. I echo all y'all's concerns about Yelich. Not fully off of him, but it's pricey. And there's a lot of guys here just in this tier that are really nice, let alone the next tier that are kind of interesting. And obviously, we're getting cheaper as we move down the board. Let's talk about someone from my favorite team, Riley Green, who, interestingly enough, despite being from my favorite team, is somebody I've taken time to buy in on. I've come to the Riley Green camp rather tepid over these last couple of years, where I'm like, I'm not sure that I quite see things. Well, last year sold me a good bit, especially with the 24 homers in 584 plate appearances, because I wasn't sure. You know, I kept hearing like these Michael Brantley type comps, which made some sense to me with the batting average, although he strikes out way more than Brantley does. That's where I thought that comp kind of fell apart. But, you know, they're saying like average with not as much power. Nice little power step last year, though, which I do like. 24 homers. Average did drop, you know, going from 288 to 262, so kind of a trade-off there. Still need that first super fully healthy season, the 600 plus plate appearances, but a lot to like from last year's campaign. 24-year-old Riley Green. How are we treating him this year, Justin?
I don't think I'm treating him that much different. I know there are a lot of people who are really excited about Riley Green, and I've been kind of the low man on him in the industry. I think I comped him to kind of like a prime Melky Cabrera type, who could be like a low 20s homers with some.
When the hell did Melky Cabrera ever hit 20 homers?
The year he got suspended for
absolutely never. I'll stake my life on it. Well, I shouldn't say that. I will bet a lot on it. Don't kill me, please. There's no way.
No, it's 17. So,
okay. Yeah, no, terrible comp.
It 20. No, this was my comp coming into last season.
Okay.
I you know, he definitely stepped it up with the power like last year. I just don't know if he's ever going to turn into the star that I think a lot of people think he is. He's not a great in-zone hitter. He has dealt with some injuries that have kind of kept him from getting to that 600 plate appearance kind of mark. I think he's fine. I don't know that I love him as much as other people. Let's see. I'll pull up my projection real quick on him. I've got him for 27 home runs, a 258 batting average, and 5 stolen bases.
27 bombs. You got him for more than he had last year. That's pretty friendly for somebody you're down on.
I have him projected for 625 plate appearances.
What are his runs and ribbies for Riley Green?
Pretty decent, like 86, 89, I think.
I was going to say double 80s there. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty good. Now, I will say he's actually more expensive than Yelich because, again, we're not necessarily in direct order of the ADP right now. He's 98 in these OCs with a very wide range, 73. So that's for those leagues where there's a big Riley Green believer, and with a max of 114 when it's a league full of Justin and I and clones of us who aren't as hot on Riley Green. That I can get on board with. I'll just say that right away. At the max pick, I would take Riley Green. At the min pick, absolutely not. I'm not with him at 73. What about you, Joe? Break the tie here, or actually, no, it's not a tie because we're both out on him. Join us or be an outcast that we make fun of.
No, I kind of like Riley Green. I don't mind.
Oh, loser! Oh, outcast.
I'm liking a Tigers guy, and Paul's calling me a loser. What's going on?
I know. See, I'm not a homer. I'm just trying to overly show that I'm not a homer.
That's good. For me with Riley Green, it's if I have speed already taken care of, especially if I've taken like a Carroll type, or if I have Bobby Witt Jr., I'm a lot more willing to take him. I think that he's a really solid 4-category contributor. The barrel rate was 13%, 46 on the hard hit. Launch angle's not too bad. I think he, in an upside, could be 30-plus homers for him. I worry a little bit about the lineup because the lineup, especially with the loss of Matt Vierling.
You lost me. You had me gassing up a Tiger, and now you're talking trash. No, go ahead. I'm just teasing you, of course. I know the lineup has issues, and the Vierling loss is a bummer because I was pretty excited. When we talked about him at third base, Justin and I actually expressed some excitement, and then he gets nicked up, and now he's going to be out strained rotator cuff for a little while.
One of my most rostered players this year. It was brutal loss.
At least you haven't been paying super crazy prices for him, but that still stinks because he's a nice infield outfield guy, and he's already ruled out for opening day.
Exactly. Now we have Wenzel Perez projected as the number 3 hitter, and that's, as much as I like Wenzel Perez,
it's a little
probably
dicey.
Not ideal. Probably not
ideal. A
little
dicey. I get it.
The runs and ribbies may be something that comes into question a little bit. The bat has him projected in the 70s, 79, 73. That might be where I land. I think he can potentially get out of that because of the power. I think, if he's hitting third and he is living up to that 30 home run potential, then I think that he can probably get into the 80s. But the runs and RBI is where I worry a little bit. But if I have a speed taken care of in the early going, then I'm more than happy to take him in the 8th or 9th round.
Okay. I think that's all right there on Riley Green. I hope he dominates. I'd love to be looking like a fool because I didn't get high enough on, one of the best players on my favorite team, and he comes out and, hits 290 and 30 homers. I don't think that's going to happen, but I would love to eat a fat L on that with Riley Green. Let's talk about somebody I do like, and I'm very big on, and I put these next two guys right by each other because they're kind of the two hottest prospects that are going to be on their opening day teams ready to make a big impact this year. It's Dylan Cruz and Jason Dominguez. Let's start with Cruz. I've been talking all offseason about how I like that Washington lineup, so I don't need to reiterate that again, even though I technically just did. But, Cruz didn't exactly pop off in his sample last year of 31 games, but he wasn't terrible either. I know an 80 WRC plus is not going to jump off the page at anybody, but I didn't think he was like super overmatched. 253 BABIP definitely stung him, and I'm not going to say that was all bad luck. But I certainly don't believe that that's who he is. 57% ground ball rate. I think he'll figure out his stroke a little bit in the majors. He still flexed the speed though. He went 12 for 15 in that month. And we know that Washington runs like the wind. So Dylan Cruz, I'm expecting that big breakthrough year this year. I'm really, really excited for him. I'm happy to pay the price for him at pick 110. I've already got some shares and I don't mind getting more. He is on the rise. Just looking at my TARF league, he went 144 there. You're not really getting that price as much anymore on Dylan Cruz. Joe, let's start with you on Dylan Cruz. You buying in on Cruz?
I am. The price, like you said, though, is rising significantly. Like I've gotten a few shares in the 140, 150 range.
Yeah.
Do I want to jump in the 100 to 110 range? I'm not as excited about that. I think the speed is legit. The plate skills are pretty good. He didn't strike out a lot in his first go around. The swinging strike rate was very good. The hard hit rate was solid. The lineup I think is good, but I don't think it's amazing. I think that we could potentially see him in the 60s or 70s for runs and RBIs. But I think a 15-30 season is definitely in play here with a batting average that won't necessarily help you, but it won't really hurt you, somewhere in like the 240, 250 range. I think if the price continues to go up, if he's anywhere inside the top 100, I can't do it. But in like that 120 and beyond range, I'm willing to take a chance.
Top 100 at main event time would be a bit tough for me with Cruz because at that point, I'm probably just going to take Seiya Suzuki, who you guys know I'm obsessed with. So, yeah. If the price keeps moving up on Cruz, that becomes a little bit rough. I will say this, my only pushback on what you said there is I think he can score 85 plus without too much craziness happening. With James Wood, Nathaniel Lowe, and Josh Bell, I think all three of those guys are set to have really nice years, and he's batting behind them he's in the 2 spot, so all three of those guys are behind him. So I think the runs scored can definitely be there. As a number 2 hitter, he's going to have Abrams, and then at the bottom of the order, Jacob Young, and either my boy Tana, who's not currently in the lineup, but Paul DeYoung instead. Maybe the ribbies aren't going to be as hot. I'll grant that. But I think the runs could be sneaky strong for Dylan Cruz, along with the speed. And then we'll see how the power develops this year. I think he's eventually... I've comped him to Miami Christian Yelich just in terms of the statistical profile. And I stress that because the power wasn't quite there yet. But I do believe that his overall potential is peak Christian Yelich, like the MVP style Christian Yelich eventually. And, you know, Yelich didn't run as much as Cruz did early on here, but part of that was the rules were different as well. So again, if you're looking for a statistical comp, that's what I'm going with there with young Christian Yelich. What about you with Dylan Cruz, Justin? Where do you have him projected in? Is he somebody that you're going for around pick 110 or so?
I have Cruz projected for 15 home runs and 24 stolen bases with a 253 kind of batting average. I'm a fan, and I do think that he is going to be good at some point. I just don't know if he's ready to take off this year. The launch angle was sub 10%, though it is
132 plate appearances.
Yeah, but I mean it was pretty low, I think, throughout his minor leagues. You look at like his fly ball percentage in the minors, and it's all sub 40%. Now it is 50% in spring training, so hey, maybe this is a good sign. It's still very early.
Figuring it out.
Yeah, maybe we are starting to see something, you know, a little bit of a swing change kind of coming into spring, but it's still pretty early to kind of, you know, we were talking in my TGFBI like group chat, we were talking about Zach Geloff and my boy Matt Thompson drafted him. He's like, I know it's a little bit of a reach, but he was so good, even though when he was actually being like with terrible skills. Now he gets to move to Sacramento, and I was like, he's got a 55.6% strikeout rate in spring training right now.
I'm so out on Geloff. Maybe I need to dive back in and see if there's something there.
Volume though, he's right. He's gonna play in a really good stadium. So like,
but what's the batting average gonna be if he's striking out? We don't need to get bogged down on Geloff, but like, I'm not.
And that was my argument was like, listen, as an analyst, I have a really hard time drafting hitters that can't hit or pitchers that can't pitch.
That is difficult to do.
Yeah, right. It's the John Maddenism of fantasy baseball.
Right.
So, but that being said, like a guy like Cruz, I think everybody's expecting this to be the year he kind of takes off, but we're talking about a guy who, like I said, only had 130 plate appearances at the majors. He's 23 years old, and I just don't know if this is going to be a year where it like all comes together. It may be a little bit slower progression than that. That being said, at least he's going after the Lawrence Butlers and the Brenton Doyles of the world, so like it's not as big of a price.
I think this price expects a jump, but I don't know that it expects the leap from Dylan Cruz, and I think that that's fair. Because I don't either. Like you said, I think both of y'all said 15 homers for Dylan Cruz. I think that's fine. And I think with 15, 25, a decent average, I think decent runs, but probably uninspiring ribbies. I think that's he's priced fairly for that.
Yeah, I don't think he's priced poorly at all. I just tend to wait and grab other guys. Personally.
Sure. I don't agree with the projections I have him for a 246 average. Again, I just think he's a better batting average guy than that. Because if he does live on the ground and maybe the power doesn't take that big step forward, I think it'll translate into more base hits. Right. And I know he had like all the ground balls last year and it didn't translate with a 253 BABIP, but I think it will in a full year here for Dylan Cruz. Let's jump to Jason Dominguez because he's the other big prospect and they're kind of like neck and neck. Although in these OCs, these last 12 OCs, Cruz has separated himself with that 110 ADP to Dominguez's 131. They'd been kind of really, like I said, just kind of going with each other. And it's that thing where when one goes, the other goes next. I'm looking at the DCs. They're at 130 for Cruz, 134 for Dominguez. But now we've seen a split in these OCs. Jason. You guys can't all have J names, man. It's garbage. I'm talking about the guy who's not even here, but I have two J names here. Justin, I'll stick with you here on Dominguez. Do you like him more than Cruz at price with a 20-point discount?
Probably not. I have a really hard time knowing what Jason Dominguez is. And I know at least Cruz is going to be hit at the top of the lineup. I don't think Dominguez is going to be doing that in New York, how good their lineup is. And I also think that because of the way this Yankees team is constructed and the Nationals team is constructed, that Cruz is kind of guaranteed to play. Like, I think they're just going to let him play. He's going to get the 600 plus plate appearances,
in my opinion.
Whereas Dominguez, like, if he doesn't hit, I think he could go down pretty easily. I think they would move on to a different option, even an uninspiring option, just to give Dominguez full plate appearances at the minor levels if he struggles. So I think there's a lot more risk in Dominguez's bat. I do have him for close to a 2020 season because I think he's going to get an opportunity to start the year, and I think he's going to, probably be fine. But I don't think he has the upside or the safety that a guy like Dylan Cruz does. And so, therefore, I would never draft Dominguez over Cruz.
Co-sign that. Even with the discount, I'm not there. I don't dislike Dominguez. There are worlds where I can get him. If I miss on Cruz and, take somebody else and then I circle back around for an outfielder that next round, I could land on Dominguez. But if both are available, I'm always going with Cruz. Joe, where are you at on Jason Dominguez coming into his first full season as a major leaguer?
That's totally fair. The Cruz over Dominguez point is one that I agree with. Dominguez, we saw it last year. The Yankees aren't just going to commit. Like, they playing Alex Verdugo over Jason Dominguez. And
that guy doesn't even have a job now, which, by the way, is kind of crazy.
Yeah, kind of crazy.
Kind of crazy. Come on.
Yeah, I mean,
the Marlins can't get him on a 1 year.
Once Brandon Belt had like a 135 WRC plus and didn't get signed the next year, I kind of just gave up on trying to figure out who's. I mean, DH only types, less valuable, but it's kind of weird who gets contracts and who doesn't.
Justin and I, being older, have an older version of that, and it wasn't quite as good as the Belt one that you're saying. But I couldn't believe that Jermaine Dye didn't get a look in 2010. Now, he was coming off more of a meager year, a 102 OPS plus, but 27 homers. It was a 127 OPS plus the year before that. I know he was 36, but I was just surprised that nobody wanted him at all. You mentioned Belt. Verdugo at least can ostensibly bring some outfield capability. I know he's had some follies out there for sure, but he can play in the outfield. You're not DH only. In fact, he doesn't have a good enough bat to do that. And again, I just don't understand why the Pirates, a team that can actually make some noise, can't give him a buzz, let alone a team like the Marlins that has the worst lineup in the history of the universe that has no interest in him for some reason. I don't get it. Okay, so Dominguez, you agree that you're not taking him over Cruz. What about him in a vacuum then at pick 130 for you, Joe?
I have him as my 37th outfielder. I did just draft him in TGFBI, which was my first time taking a chance on him. I think part of it was just a little bit of the FOMO, wanting to have at least one share. Because if he does play a full season, I think there's a good chance he gives you 23 home runs and like 25 stolen bases or something.
Right.
13% barrel rate for his career with a 50% hard hit rate. Those are very small sample sizes. He's only played 26 games, but he can hit the crap out of the ball. He's got speed. I think at this point, the Yankees are kind of out of excuses for not letting him play after all of last year, essentially being down. I think that they are just going to let him play. He's probably going to be in the middle of the lineup somewhere I think he's probably going to bat sixth. I think probably that makes the most sense behind Jazz, behind Goldschmidt. So it could be a good RBI potential spot as well. Right. I like him, but I do agree that Cruz is the preferred target. He's a lot safer. He's a lot more projectable. But if Dominguez plays a whole season, I think that there's a good chance he outperforms Cruz at the same time.
Was called the Martian. One of these guys that we definitely have the prospect fatigue on, we being the fantasy baseball community, not necessarily the three of us, but we shouldn't. Brother's 22. Feels like he's been around for a decade because he did sign very young. It wasn't quite when he was 12, but no joke, he was like 16, I think. So it's been in our consciousness for a long time, so it feels like, this guy's had a million chances. And Joe brought it up. He has 26 Major League games, 100 Major League plate appearances. He's still a blank slate as far as I'm concerned, but that also adds to the uncertainty a little bit of it. And they don't need to force it if it isn't working. Like, they should give Dominguez an opportunity, but if it's not going well, then yeah, he gets sent out because they're a team that needs to win. They can't afford to let him learn on the job completely. Let's move over to somebody who's a much more established, but going out to Seattle for his first full year. He got traded there last year. Of course, I'm talking about Randy Arozarena, some MFer named Randy. And, full year in Seattle's a bit dicey. Honestly, they basically made their offseason moves last year when they traded for Arozarena and picked up off the waiver wire and then eventually signed Victor Robles. They deemed that to be enough because they're going to run it back with basically the same exact team that they had, with those two guys really being the newest additions. What do we think of Arozarena? He really wasn't bad in his time with them. 54 games. He did put up a 118 WRC plus, but you have to have some lingering concerns about that ballpark, Justin. First full year. Now, he's coming from Tampa Bay, which wasn't a great place to hit either. So maybe he's just used to hitting in places with terrible batting eyes. What are we getting from Randy? I know you've been a big fan in the past. Is he getting a 5th straight 2020 plus season?
I think this is kind of the year where things fall apart for him, and that we kind of give up on Randy Rosarena. The skills have kind of gotten worse and worse under the hood.
Give up on him as like a top 150 pick, you mean, right? Because not completely.
At least at the ADP, right?
Right.
And I mean, I still have him as like a 19 homer, 15 stolen base guy, but it comes to a 240 batting average, and I just think there's so many other guys with upside going around the spot that Randy is going, that as much as I love what he's done for me in the past, I hate the fact that he's moving to Seattle, the fact that they didn't want to add to this team. Shout out to Justin Turner for just torching them in the media, like, and saying what everybody should be saying about Seattle, which is this is a legendary rotation with some really interesting pieces in the offense that all they need to do is add a couple pieces to, and all of a sudden it is a juggernaut in the AL West, where the Astros are taking a step back. The Rangers were down last year. The Angels still suck, and the A's are still kind of rebuilding. Like, this was a chance for them to put a hammerlock on this division, and they didn't do anything this offseason. So
criminal. Malpractice.
It's a war crime. It really is. So I'm not in on Randy. This year is my first year not being in on him, and so maybe he will have a massive rebound, because anytime I quit a dude, they go off. But
you were big on him these last couple of years, but I understand the fade. I will say this. Tiny sample that I'm going to parse even further, right? It was 54 total games with Seattle, but his home sample was actually markedly better. 811 OPS at home, 664 on the road as a Mariner. Kind of wild, but 113 plate appearances, so I want to temper expectations big time. I just wanted to underscore that. Joe, do you share our concerns about Randy being out in the Pacific Northwest for a full year here, or are you going to pivot and say, hey, I'm going to buy in on this?
I'm not as pessimistic as Justin is. Before I go into the Randy spiel, though, I want to point out somebody else real quick who had crazy home and away splits in Seattle last year. Luke Raley was much better at home in Seattle than on the road. 15 homers. Wild. 15 homers at home with a 900 OPS, and on the road it was a 666 OPS with 7 homers. Sometimes those splits are really strange, like not at all what you'd expect. But
it's like, what do you mean you guys can't hit here? I'm amazing here.
With the Rosarena, I'd be more inclined to say it's probably small sample size noise, but I think that he's still somebody that I've been targeting. Like, I think 2020 is a pretty well-established baseline for him. Last year was pretty terrible. Last year was an awful season, and he still managed to get there. It was still a 114 WRC plus overall. The BABIP was low, but he probably deserved some of that. The barrel rate came down, the EVs came down. So I understand being more down on him than previous years for sure. But I also think that he can very easily give me 20 homers and 20 steals in the 10th round. And I don't think that that's something that's that prevalent at that point in the draft. In an OBP league, he gets a boost for sure. I took him in Tout Wars. And standard 5x5, it's a little bit harder if you're worried about the batting average. But I also don't think that that's something that we can project at 219 going forward. I think he's probably in the 230s, 240s, where it's not really hurting or helping you, probably more of a negative of anything. But I think that 2020 is what still has me buying back into him.
I'm changing the board on y'all for a couple reasons. One, their ADPs basically match right now, so it makes sense to move the guy up that's right behind him on the sheet now if you guys are looking at it. And two, they're former teammates, so there's that kind of little tie in there. I'm talking about Josh Lowe, and I want to bring him in here because, again, in these OCs, they're going one after another. 144 for Rosarena, 146 for Lowe. Between those two, Joe, who are you taking? Because they're both looking to bounce back off of tougher years. Lowe didn't get 2020. He went 10-25, but only in 106 games, and he hit 241. So between those two, if both are available, do you stick with the Rosarena or do you go to Lowe in that case, going to the minor league park, Steinbrenner Field?
Lowe's been one of my favorite targets all draft season. Going back to the pod we did, Paul, in Arizona when we were doing the FTN pod, we were talking about late round hitters. Josh Lowe came up, and he's been somebody that since that day I've been very interested in. He had a bunch of injuries last year, but it didn't seem like anything that was too sticky. He hurt like every part of his body in some way and had to miss a little bit of time for various things. But the barrel rate was still 10%, 46 on the hard hit rate. The ballpark upgrade is really nice. I think that he can be a 20, and honestly, if things go right for him, I wouldn't project this, but 20-40 I think is on the table for Josh Lowe if he's able to stay healthy. I like the Rays as a whole this year. A little bit of concerning news about Junior Caminero just before we started recording, but I think that the team as a whole is still really solid, and I think Lowe is one of my favorite mid-round outfielders this year.
Yeah, I would definitely take Lowe over Rosarena in that comparison there, and I'm kind of in on a buyback too. Like, he's got his believers, like yourself, Joe, but not too many. Not a lot of people gassing him back up. And even in a down year last year, what did I say? He went 10-25 in 106 games. That's not bad. 241, not knocking your socks off, but palatable. And again, we're a year removed from 2032 with a 292. So we don't need that to come all the way back to be worth pick 146. What about you, Justin? A Rosarena versus Lowe, making you take one. Are you going with Lowe?
If you're making me take one,
yeah, because I knew you're going to pull some bullshit like, I don't want either, as if that fucking helps anyone.
Because I don't. I think I'm taking a Rosarena, but
interesting. Okay.
Now, in a 10 or 12 team league, I would take Lowe. I just think Lowe's upside is massive. And like, I actually have really good numbers on Lowe. The problem is I don't have him for a ton of plate appearances. This is a guy who sometimes platoons in Tampa Bay, dealt with a lot of injuries last year.
Sure.
If you're guaranteeing me health, I'm for sure taking Josh Lowe. The problem for me is I don't know how good this lineup is going to be around him. I don't know if he's going to platoon a bunch. I don't know if he's going to be healthy. So in a shallow league where there's good replacement value, I'll take the gamble on Josh Lowe. But in a 15-teamer, I'm probably just taking a Rosarena and banking the plate appearances.
Yeah, I think even in a 15-teamer, I'm going Josh Lowe personally.
I probably am too, just because I'll take the upside gamble. But
and like
my projections say to take Rosarena.
I don't think it's that difficult to replace an outfielder in a 15-teamer. Obviously, it depends when it happens, and
I'll
what's
let you
going
know
on
when I
with the
draft
pool.
my first one in TGFBI.
Right, you don't have one yet, but I think you can, with the addition of the DH in the National League, hitters. You do find more in the main event universe, which is, a lot of times we look through the prism of that. I know not everyone plays that, but the three of us definitely do. So we look through that there. And I do think even in that situation, I'm still going to go Low. And it's not just because like shoot the moon upside. It's because I just think he's a really good player. And I'm just scared of a Rosarena in Seattle. I'm terrified of it. And I really like Lowe going to the Steinbrenner Field. I think that's really very cool. And I do think that their lineup could be pretty hot this year. I'm with you on that, Joe. Caminero did leave with back tightness, and we talked about him maybe being a little overdrafted relative to some guys that we were talking offline before the show. But if he's all right with the back, that lineup runs pretty deep. I even kind of like some of the bottom of the order guys. Like Morel's a total like hit or miss wild card, but he does have upside. Aronda's a guy we've spoken highly of. And Johnny DeLuca's somebody we'll get to in a couple episodes to talk him up as a late round pick. So I like Josh Lowe over Rosarena. Let's go to the Midwest and talk about a couple of Cubs. Pete Crow Armstrong and Ian Happ. You got the up and comer here with PCA, who really had a nice second half. Found a little bit of a power stroke to go with that great speed. The defense locks in his playing time, which is nice. And then you got just the steady Eddie with Happ. And again, this podcast has been a long-time gigantic fan of Ian Happ, and he's just punching the clock on quality seasons for us these last few years here. Gold Glover out there doesn't necessarily mean much for fantasy purposes other than the fact that it guarantees the playing time. 158, 158, 153 are his games played the last 3 years, so you love that. And 2015 type, actually he didn't reach 15 in either of the years, so it's unfair to say that. 2010 type vibe from Happ with like a 240s something average. Let's start with PCA. Actually, give me who you prefer between the two, and then PCA thoughts specifically. Start with you, Joe, on the two Cubs here.
So I like them both a lot, but if I had to choose one, it would be Ian Happ. I think that he's
before you go much further. My fault. I didn't get the ADPs. Happ 126, Pete Crow Armstrong 140. So about a round later there, but you're still taking the established quality vet in Happ, even at the higher price, which I think I agree with, by the way.
Yeah, I think it's just a lot safer. He's going to lead off. He has 3 straight 120 WRC plus seasons. That's pretty hard to come by.
You love
he's
it.
He's a perennially undervalued player in drafts.
Agreed.
For whatever reason, I think he's just not the sexiest player. His name doesn't jump off the board at a lot of people, but he is just a producer. Like you said, the glove keeps him in the lineup. 4 straight seasons of at least 148 games, 25 homers in 2 of those years. Pretty much a lock for that 10 to 15 stolen base range. I think the batting average is the only thing that you worry about a little bit, but
sure.
248 career hitter. He's projected at 248. You know, he walks like a duck, sounds like a duck. He's a 248 hitter. So I think that that's totally fine, especially when you're getting 25 and 12 or something with good runs and RBIs at the top of that lineup, which I think we're all in that the Cubs lineup is very good this year, hitting ahead of Tucker, Suzuki, Bush, Swanson. I think that that's gold for him. PCA is still somebody that I'm interested in, but there is some more risk. Like, he figured it out for a month and a half or so last year. Maybe it was a little bit longer than that.
Right.
But he's been pretty rough offensively for a good period of time. So I'm not as sold on PCA. I think he's a good late source of speed with some potential for power, but 36 hard hits, 7
and not even that late. Sorry to interrupt you though, but like 140 is not that late. Like, if you need that speed, like, it has moved up the board because he hit 7 homers in the second half. To your point there, that it wasn't the longest sample of greatness there, because I've always been out on PCA. And then that second half last year, okay, I opened my eyes to him. I said, okay, that's pretty nice, but I still am not quite there. You know, let me just throw it to you with the 2 guys that we just talked about, Arozarena and Lowe, because he actually goes right in that order. PCA, Arozarena, Lowe. Who are you taking out of those 3, Joe, before we get over to Justin's thoughts?
PCA would be 3rd on that list for me.
Okay, and he's the most expensive.
Yeah, I think the other 2 are safer options. They're more projectable as full season assets. Like, I think that PCA is still going to be good, but like, even his quote unquote breakout in the second half was a 736 OPS, 104 WRC plus. Not necessarily translates directly to fantasy. The speed is valuable, especially if you've taken the Alonso Schwarber types early on. You need to recoup some of that. But then he also hurts your batting average a little bit too. Like, he was a 237 hitter last year, and the XBA was lower than that. So there are a lot of concerns.
286 OBP. That's so bad. Yeah. And I know, you know, if you're not playing an OBP league, it doesn't matter as much, but it counts for runs. You know, not going to be on base as often. And it's just really, really horrendous. They might be batting him 9th if he keeps that up. Yep. But he is a remarkably brilliant defender. For every bit as good as Hap is, PCA is probably substantially better. And that's more to speak to PCA's defensive quality than it is to say anything negative about Hap. Justin, I know you're going to say it's team construction. Let's say you don't have direct needs one way or the other when these 2 are coming up. See, I can read you like a book. I knew that you're going to say that. 126 ADP for Hap, 140 for PCA. Which Cub you going for there? It's got to be Hap, right?
Listen, you think you can read me like a book.
I can read you like a book.
You cannot read me like a book.
You're lying to try to make me look bad. That's 100% what you were going to say. Don't even lie to me.
Because I alluded to this earlier when we were talking about Zach Geloff, and I don't like hitters who can't hit.
Yes,
I don't want Pete Crow Armstrong on any team. Yes.
I could have told you that too. I still read you like a book. I knew you did not want him, but I didn't want you to give me the well, if I need speed, maybe I'll reach for him, because I knew you were Hap all day long. But no, you're right. Like, we can't just buy into that second half as like, oh, now he's a guy with some power and can hit a bit. It was a nice finish, but like, if it had been April and May, people would be forgetting about it. But since it was August and September, I think we put a little bit too much sometimes into the second half as a fantasy world. I think that happens sometimes.
Especially because the underlying contact metrics were worse in the second half.
And that's what Joe was saying. He was still not a good hitter.
Yeah, he's still a terrible in-zone hitter. Now, here's the thing. If you want to take the gamble because the defense is so good, it does in some ways remind you a little bit of Brent Doyle, right? Brent Doyle was going to get the playing time at the start of the year because he had, really, really good defense. He was not a very good in-zone hitter.
But what's the key difference?
Colorado.
The park protection, right? Well, the park made up for some of his hitting flaws for Doyle. And Wrigley can't really do that as much for Pete Crow Armstrong. On certain days it can blow a homer out, but it can also blow a few back in too. It can go both ways against you.
I think that part of it too was like, hey, we haven't had the eyes on Brent Doyle the way we have on Pete Crow Armstrong. Pete Crow Armstrong's been a top 100 prospect for a while. now, and at one point was like a top 25 prospect. To me, like, I just don't see a world in which Pete Armstrong's hit tool develops in the way that like Lawrence Butler's or Britton Doyle's did. So I think he will play because he does have that amazing defense. I've upped my projection on him to 600 plate appearances because of that, and the numbers that make are actually really enticing in terms of power and speed. I've got him for 14 home runs and 38 stolen bases.
Ooh, but that's not bad.
But it comes with a 224 batting average.
And that makes sense. With the way Pete Armstrong hits, or doesn't, as it were, that makes sense.
And it also comes with runs and RBI totals that aren't super enticing, like, below 70 on both. So I'm not going to drop Pete Armstrong, especially because I feel like these are the type of guys that people go, well, I need some speed. I'm going to get Pete Armstrong. If anything happens to him, can you make up 40 stolen bases on the wire? It's not as easy as I think people make it out to be. So I don't like these rabbits. I consider him kind of a rabbit type of player. Yep. I'm probably going to be staying away from Pete Armstrong. Why would you draft Pete Armstrong when you get Jacob Young so much later?
I wouldn't, brother. And I'm going to be gassing up Young when we get there because, I won't shut the hell up about the Washington offense. And I'm geeked on him too, but he's bulked up. He's looking good. Speaking of bulking up and hitting some bombs last year, although he's a much better hitter than PCA, but Stephen Kwan, if you don't know, do either of you know his home run total off the dome?
10? Was it 10?
It was 14.
Wow.
Where the hell did that come from? He had 11 combined in, I'm adding it up, 1356 plate appearances the 2 years before that. Last year drops 14 in just 540 plate appearances. Justin, I want to stay with you before we get to Joe on Kwan. Where the hell did that come from, and is it going to stay at all? Or did you put him all the way back down to like 6 or 7?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the player you were...
Stephen Kwan.
I don't know.
Where'd that power spike come from?
I think this is one of those examples of like, I don't want to comp him to Ichiro, but like, because he's definitely not Ichiro, but like Ichiro had power in the bat that he just didn't use, right? Like people would talk about like, hey, like watch him during batting practice and you go like, oh my God, he's actually got some pop in that bat.
Well, because he'd hit 260 if he had tried to hit 25 homers.
And I think that like Kwan has more power in that bat. He just doesn't try to unleash it because that's not what the Guardians want him to do.
14's pretty nice though, dude. And he spiked his fly ball rate 10 points. What if he just kind of lives there though? Like we don't need more. Now the thing was it only came with 12 steals. And I think that was a bit shocking. I guess you can't really steal if you're getting round trippers, baby. But he still hit 292 with a 368 OBP. Why did he only go 12 for 17 on the bases for Kwan?
I honestly have no idea.
It's really shocking.
I've got him for 13 home runs and 20 stolen bases with 286, which for me is totally fine, especially for batting average.
That's hot.
He's one of those guys that like offers pretty great batting average with a lot of plate appearances at that point in the draft that doesn't destroy you in a particular category, which
not if this power is going to stick. By the way, I'll point out that his ADP is right in between Dominguez and PCA at 136. And again, I'm looking at the last 12 RotoWire online championships. Those are 12-team leagues. They have fab. I am going to shift back to the DCs at a certain point when we get to a particular depth because they just don't go in the OCs. And we want to talk about the entire pool at each position. But for now, we're focused on these fab leagues because they're happening more frequently. So they're more up to date on things if you're wondering where these ADPs are coming from. So you have a pretty nice projection for him. What outfielder does Kwan rank as with that projection?
I have him, let's see, off the top of my head, it's kind of hard to figure out. But, I mean, I've got him above Cody Bellinger, above Mike Trout, above Adolis Garcia, above Arozarena. So, like, he's probably 30-ish.
I was going to say late 20s, because 32 is his ADP. And with a projection of 817 and 276 on ATC, that makes him the 33rd outfielder. So I think you might have him in the mid to late 20s even, if we're just eyeballing it. Can you select all the names on Excel and then it'll say the count in the bottom there?
I have them. Yeah, I think I have them about 32. So right about ADP.
Right about ADP there. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know to believe in the power. And if I do draft Quan, which I usually don't, because I'm like, oh, he's kind of a rabbit. Well, not quite, because that's a little unfair. He doesn't steal enough to be a rabbit, but he's like a batting average steals guy with not enough power. I'm not going to bank on the power. I'm still going to plan for like 7 or 8. And then if I get the extra 6 or 7, then that'll be bonus. Like I will continue to draft power around it. But if I need the batting average when Quan's going, I'm definitely more open to it than I have been in previous years. Joe, where do you come out on Quan coming off this crazy breakout year? More of the same or a different makeup next year where maybe the steals come back, the power comes down, the average continues? What are we getting from Quan at age 27, a magic season?
So I think I'm down on him. I have him way too high up in my rankings. He's going to be coming down right after the show. I need to move him down personally. And I think I don't know how to square the gains in fly ball rate. He went from 29 to 39, but in his first year he was at 35 over a full season, and that led to 6 home runs. So
did he have a kid? Does he just get dad strength or something?
I'm not sure. Maybe who knows? But here's the thing: like, yeah, the barrel rate more than doubled. The problem is it went from 1.1% to 2.6%. I think the launch angle going up helped him a lot. But the actual power, I don't really think there's a ton there. I think he was more fortunate than anything to hit these home runs. I'm really putting a lot of stock into the Bat X projection and looking at those StatCast numbers that get incorporated into it. They have him for 4 homers. It might be a little bit low. I think that he's probably in the 5 to 7 range. So if I'm drafting him, that's kind of what I'm expecting. And then the stolen bases are something that's kind of interesting. If you look at his sprint speed, 2022, he was in the 80th percentile. 2023, he was in the 71st percentile. This year, down to the 43rd percentile. So
that's interesting.
He's been losing some sprint speed. So I wonder if those steals are something that is just not coming back. Maybe he's just a 10 to 12 steal guy as opposed to a 20 plus. I think he's more of a fade. Like batting average late is really valuable. And if he's even able to go 10 and 10, I think if he hits 300, you're taking that. But I think it does give you some deficiencies in terms of RBIs, in terms of power. If he hits 275 instead of 300, then that could be a big problem. So he's more of a fade than a target for me. I understand the allure, but the data is a little bit concerning.
Yeah, I think there's just other guys that I like. Go ahead, Justin. You have something to add?
Yeah. Remember that they changed the makeup of that stadium and it created a wind tunnel into right field. And I think that is where this power comes from, right? This is why Josh Naylor...
Quan got some extra homers from Progressive Field, changing the park a bit.
Yeah, so, and this is why, like, Josh Naylor had such a massive year last year. The lefty hitters in Progressive got that boost. Now they're keeping the stadium the way it is. So I think there's a chance he can repeat this just based on that.
That's fair.
Progressive Field, 5th in lefty homers just last year. Let me go back to 2023 to see where it moved from. In 2023, it was last.
Yeah.
So a massive move.
Change.
A massive move.
I think they took out seats or something like that.
Right.
It created a wind tunnel out to right field. And so bank on your lefty hitters in Progressive.
Wow. Yeah, and I knew it was a good spot for lefties to go. I did not realize that it was that substantial of a jump. Interestingly enough, D-backs 27th. So basically, Josh Naylor is going back to what it was in 2023.
This is why I'm staying away from Josh Naylor in drafts.
I have been too, and I am nervous about that park. He'll get obviously the occasional trip to Coors, which is nice, but he also has to contend with the Dodgers and Padres pitching staffs. So that move was tough for him. I like the move. I have no problem with the move for Arizona as like a team, not re-signing Walker and instead bringing in Naylor. I think that's fine in general, but for the fantasy purposes,
Well, hold on a second. One thing. Well, how does the run boost offset the park changes? Because Arizona had the most runs scored in baseball last year.
Do you think they're going to do that again, though?
I don't know, but Carroll
had good.
Where was Cleveland?
I'm not 100% sure. Actually, I should probably know these things before I start spouting.
No, that's fine. I mean, that's a good point, though, right? Can it offset it enough? If the runs go up a particular amount to cover like an 8 or 8 or 9 homers being coming off the ledger, though, right? I think that's the question. Is like, so Justin, you do projections. What do you have for Naylor's home run count this year after 31 last year, 17 the year before? Now there was also a playing time increase. That was 31 in 633 plate appearances, 17 in 495. So let me extrapolate that real quick to get an equal comparison. 22 to 31 if you'd gotten 633 each of those 2 years.
Give me 1 second.
While you're looking that up, I'll tell you that the Guardians had the 14th most runs, 100 and basically about 180 below the Diamondbacks. So that goes back to your point, Joe, about, okay, so yes, he's going to maybe have fewer homers because of his new home park and some of the, other teams that he has to face, but could the runs skyrocket? Like, could they really take a substantial jump from 84 last year, maybe up to 100? He's batting third in that lineup.
Yeah,
I have.
Go ahead, Justin. Go ahead.
I have Naylor for 27 home runs, 77 runs scored, 89 RBIs.
Okay. Wow, that's a big RBI dip.
Yeah.
How many did you say?
89.
89.
And how many plate appearances? Because I think you got to boost that. He had 97 and 108 the last 2 years, and he's going to ostensibly a better one. No,
545.
Okay, but he did have 97 and 495 the year before. I don't know. That's probably my biggest quibble there, because you didn't even cost him too many homers. You only took off 4 from last year's total, and honestly, on a per plate appearance basis, you didn't even take off that many because you shaved off 90 plate appearances from 2024. So I don't know, Naylor. Interesting. Very interesting stuff there.
I'm just being devil's advocate.
No. I think it's a good thing to bring up, because if the runs, let's say the Ribbies hold-ish. He had 108 last year. Let's bring it down to like 95. Okay, so we take 13 off. That's not nothing. But then we push the runs up from 84 to 100. He's batting third. He could score 100 there, I think. But we'll go 95. So we'll go 95, 95. And then the homers come down to, say, 23. I don't know. Does all of that mix still equal the similar guy? I guess where do we have the batting average, though, too? Because he went from 308 to 243. What's your batting average looking like for Naylor?
For Naylor, I have him at 257.
Okay, so you have it bumping up a little bit. So I don't know. I know this isn't a first base preview here, but like, I'm questioning myself on him.
I might have to rework that.
Maybe a little deeper dive.
I'll do a deeper dive after Podpalooza.
All right. We inadvertently hit a little segue there, because the guy that we're going to talk next, we did discuss at first base. So we move into the next tier with Spencer Steer. And the reason it's worth bringing him back up is A, because first base was a million years ago that we discussed it. But B, we unfortunately have bad news about him. He is injured, Spencer Steer is, and he's going to be out for a bit. Likely to start the season on the IL with a shoulder issue. And even if he doesn't, he's got a shoulder issue. And what's that going to do to his power? Like, that's the biggest question. So looking at Spencer Steer here in these last 12 drafts, he's down to pick 153. He's got a crazy range, 112 to 214. So, I think if I did more narrow range, he's really falling into the 200s even later in some leagues here. In fact, let me just do March only and see what that does for Steer's numbers here to get a more recent update. Yeah, it's down to 155. So like it's going down and down and down. That only shaved off 2 drafts. But you get the point. He's starting to move down. Justin, where are you on Spencer Steer right now with the shoulder issue and a 155 ADP?
I'm not touching him. Just staying.
Just fully off the board.
I mean, you're talking about a guy who just got a cortisone shot in his shoulder. Like, that's I love Spencer Steer, and in an unlimited IL situation, I would take the gamble for cheap, right? And I definitely thought about it during labor. I will think about it during tout.
Is 155 cheap enough, or whatever the requisite auction price would be? I don't think so.
No, and that's the problem. So now this was labor was a 12-team auction, right? When I updated his projection in terms of plate appearances, it actually dropped him to a negative value player.
Holy hell.
Yeah. So like he went from being like a $12, $13 player to a negative $1.75. So like you shouldn't even be drafting him. And then, like I said, I said on the podcast, I think with Jason prior to the morning of prior to the draft, like, hey, I'll put $1 on him, and stash on him on my unlimited IL in labor if that's an option. It was not an option. So I'm not touching Spencer Steer probably rest of draft season, and I don't think anybody else should.
Yeah, not at this price. Now, if it does keep falling into like the 200s and we see more of that, maybe it comes back around. But again, NFBC universe, no, because there's no ILs and I just don't know what I'm going to be getting. Leagues with ILs, it becomes a little bit more compelling because he's first base outfield. So you love that. That's an interesting combo. And again, if you're talking 2.25, 250, maybe I can take the shot. It's a player I love, Spencer Steer, but I'm pretty out right now. Joe, where you at here? You also out?
Yeah, unfortunately. I did an auction like 2 days before this news came out. He was the last first baseman in that acceptable tier, and I pushed him up because I waited on first base, paid $13 for him. Not my favorite thing in the world.
It's not a crazy price, but that's obviously you took the big injury news that 2 days later, which is a bummer.
Huge L, taking the huge L on that one. But I think beyond the injury concerns, Spencer Steer in the second half last year batted 198 with 5 homers and a 73 WRC plus.
Woof.
Not good. You add in the injury concern. I can't take him anymore. I already had a couple shares before because he had been like, I think you mentioned this, Paul, like the range for Spencer Steer had been kind of all over the place throughout draft season. So I had a couple shares where I felt that he was a good price in the 130s, 140s. Those were November, December drafts. That's plenty enough for me at this point. More than
you stick with what you got there. Hopefully things turn positive, but right now it's not looking so good. Let's move on to our next guy here. Adolis Garcia, who I believe is also nicked up right now. Let me pull up his news. It's probably
dealing with an oblique issue.
Of course it is.
They expect him to be ready for opening day.
Yeah, they're calling it mild. Not all obliques are created equally. I know right now you see oblique in the fantasy community instantly freaks, and I get it because a lot of them are scary, but I'll take the team at their word. They're saying it's not even quite a grade 1. So it's like a half. It's a grade half oblique strain right now for Adolis. Listen, if you've been listening to this show for any amount of time, you know my feelings on him. It took me a few years to be right, but I was finally right for fading him. I didn't really believe in the breakout when it happened, and he popped off for a few years in a row. I took fat L's on it, fine. But now he's kind of back to my expectation level, and if he pops off and rebirths again, I'll take I don't care. I'm never getting in on Adolis Garcia. He went 25-11 with a 2.25 average last year. And that was my biggest issue, was I didn't really believe in the batting average, but he did it 2 years in a row with a capable average. He went 250 and 245 when I think he is like a true 220 type guy. And so that's why I'm just not going to be there. The power might be there again, 25 to 30 bombs, 10. Now the steals have faded completely though. After 25 in 2022, he's gone 9 and 11 the last 2 years in full seasons, 632 and 637 on the plate appearances. So I think he's done running at age 32. Could spike randomly, but I don't know that you could really project it without wish casting a bit. And I know, Justin, you are anti-wish casting, but I'm going to start with Joe on Adolis Garcia. Let's put the injury aside because I'll take the team at their word that it's not that big of a deal. Where are you on him, even if we get news that he's fully healthy, ready to go for opening day come main event draft season?
He's one of the hardest players in the entire pool to project because every year is a completely different version. He's gone from 99 to 112 to 126 to 92 WRC plus. The on base has been, just the last 2 years, 328 down to 284. He's been almost a 40 home run guy and then 25. Like it just every stat is so variable year to year. It's
150
really
ADP too, by the way. Let me throw that in. Go ahead.
Yeah, 150. The price is not too bad. In my Earth League, he went at 190. I think at that point, if he's fallen a lot, I don't mind taking a chance on him. The lineup is so elite. I think the Rangers, the Wyatt Langford had something with the oblique. Now Garcia with the oblique. That's all it takes for a great lineup to become just an okay lineup. But Semien, Seager, Langford, Peterson, Garcia, Young, Carter, Berger, Heim. That is a solid lineup with Garcia smack in the middle. If he's healthy, I think it's easily 100 RBI, probably in the mid-20s homers with, let's call it 7 or 8 steals. You got to regress those a little bit now as he's getting older. Just had a birthday a couple days ago. He's now 32.
Happy birthday.
But the batting average is seriously a sinkhole. That swinging strike rate went to 17% last year almost. If he hit 210 next year, it wouldn't surprise me. But if he hit 35 homers and drove in 100 at the same time, it wouldn't surprise me. There's just such a massive range of outcomes. I think for the most part, I do generally try and stay away from him.
Yeah, I mean, same for me. What about you with Adolis Garcia, Justin?
I think I'm in. I understand all the concerns and there is risk there, but we're talking about a guy who was a top 4 round pick, not that long ago. That
He shouldn't
as
have
long
been.
as he's healthy, I think I'm back in. And I wasn't in when he was a top 4 round pick, but I think like you can pretty much bank. I think 25 plus homers, 10
Sure.
stolen bases. I think that whole Rangers team is due for a bounce back. I think they just had like a weird World Series hungover thing. And so when you're getting him, after pick 150, like I'm fine with that. He's not like a major target, but definitely a guy like if he drops in the draft, I'm gonna end up with Adolis Garcia, and I have drafted him in a number of drafts.
What'd you say he was in your Earth League, Joe? 190 something?
He went at 190 on the dot. Yeah,
That brings me in. I
Yeah.
will admit that. Like if he starts getting anything like that going, okay, I can jump into the Adolis Garcia at that price point. I don't know how much we're going to see that though, especially if the news continues to get positive on the oblique. And again, main event season is still 2-3 weeks away, depending on when you're doing yours. And if the news is strong there, then I think he sticks closer to this ADP of 150 or moves up. And then all of a sudden, if you're talking 130, 125, do you stay in there, Justin, when he starts getting into the Ian Happ, Jason Dominguez, Stephen Kwan area? Does Adolis Garcia stick in that group?
I have him over, I think, everybody we've talked about today except for Kwan and Happ.
Okie dokie.
Oh, and Riley Green. I was
going to say, I was just about to ask.
So
that makes sense. Okay.
I've got him over Cruz. I've got him over Rosarena. I think that Adolis Garcia is a worthy gamble at his spot.
Disagree, but reasonable minds can disagree there. Let's go out to Baltimore. I hinted at these two earlier. We moved the teammates near each other. Their ADPs are a little bit split, but with Tyler O'Neill going out to Baltimore, I'm bringing him and Colton Cowser together here. And they're not that far apart. We're talking 169 for Colton Cowser, 181 for Tyler O'Neill. So they're pretty close here. Justin, I want to start with you on the two Baltimore boys. We know Great Baltimore is moving in, and that's going to help O'Neill more as a right-hander, of course. Cowser, he's got some oppo power, but it's not going to be the biggest deal for him. O'Neill coming off that big year in Boston, obviously, even with the park improvement, and this is still a park downgrade, no? He hit 31 homers last year in 113 games. But that's the thing. He never plays. He has the one big year, 138 games back in 2021. Since then, it's 96, 72, 113. Now, if you draft O'Neill, do you take like a Heston Kjerstad as like a handcuff, so to speak? Where are you at on these two guys, Cowser and O'Neill?
I'm all in on Colton Cowser. He's just my boy. And I have him above a lot of these other guys that we've talked about, kind of in the same. I have him right above Adolis Garcia. So, I'm probably not going to get Garcia a bunch because I'm going to take Cowser a little bit later. But, O'Neill, I feel like I got to be completely out on for the most part, outside of, 10-team leagues where there's a lot of replacement value on the wire. He just misses so much time. I only projected him for 480 plate appearances.
How could you go much higher?
Yeah, I couldn't really project it. Now, on a per plate appearance basis, he's amazing. And so, especially in daily moves lineups, in 10-team leagues, some 12-team leagues, I'll probably take the gamble, just because I know I can switch him out when he's day-to-day or missing time. So, that being said, I don't play in a lot of those leagues. So it's hard for me to say I'm going to end up with Tyler O'Neill, but I know a lot of listeners play in leagues with daily moves or 10 or 12-team leagues. So, in those leagues, I got no problem taking the gamble because, even in those 480 plate appearances, I have Tyler O'Neill for this is insane 27 home runs.
Wow! I mean, he hit 31 and 473 last year, so I don't think you're crazy out of pocket for having O'Neill up that high. I get it, I do.
So, I think he's one of those guys that got power that plays anywhere. So even if we don't know exactly how the dimensions are going to be because they're not just moving the wall completely back in.
Right. They're not erasing the changes.
Yeah. They're moving it back into pockets. But I think Tyler O'Neill's power plays anywhere when he's healthy. The problem is he's going to be very frustrating, especially for those of you who play in head-to-head leagues because you don't know when he's going to miss time. It's not always this thing of hey, he's out for 4 weeks, so you can throw him on your IL for 4 weeks. is often is like he's in the lineup on Monday and then he's not in the lineup on Tuesday and Wednesday and then he's back on Thursday. And if you have weekly lineups, that's really, really frustrating in a head-to-head league.
Absolutely agree there with Tyler O'Neill, and I'll co-sign the Cowser love. I'm just a big fan. And listen, we'd be remiss not to bring up the 31% K rate to point out that
the defense, though, that
would be
defense,
it would be nice to see him improve that. There is some batting average risk with Cowser, but the defense locks in that playing time, and that's why someone like Kerstead is on the bench. The two Baltimore Orioles here, Joe, Cowser and O'Neill. Are you also a Cowser over O'Neill? And then how do you feel about the two individually?
I am Cowser over O'Neill. The strikeout rate for Cowser, like it's pushing 31%, but the swinging strike rate was 12.8. So I think maybe he can be in that 25% range, 26% range. We definitely take that. I think that he is really, like, some people worry, like even we were talking about the other day, Justin was on the Fantasy Pros pod with us, and we were talking about, like, could he get pushed out? Who's going to get pushed out here? Like, it's not going to be Colton Cowser. I don't think Colton Cowser, like what happens if Holiday and Mayo and Kierstad and everybody does well, I still think Colton Cowser has a job.
Unless he's hitting my way, I don't think Cowser's out.
I think O'Neill is interesting at the price. Like, if I'm looking at, we might have the filters slightly different, but the last couple weeks of OCs, he's going in like the 180 range.
I got 12 OCs from 228 to 36, and that puts him at 180.
Yeah, like I don't mind taking a chance on him there. I think that it's a reasonable price as long as you're willing to understand that you're going to have to find replacements at various points throughout the season. He's probably going to play 100 to 110 games. You might get lucky and he plays 138 like he did in 2021. But if you're banking on the time missed, if you need some extra power, I can understand taking the chance on him.
Okay. I don't think that's crazy out of pocket because there's warded guys all in that area there, right? Like all the other guys that are around there, they've got their own issues. But if injury issues not one of the ones you want to deal with and you'd rather deal with like a missing skill, then maybe you go elsewhere there. But if you just say, give me the best plate appearance, per plate appearance performance, it probably is O'Neill in that pocket of guys. I could have brought your boy and said the entertainer. He's in the next tier, but he goes at pick 200. We'll get to him next episode. Let's go to Nick Castellanos because he's the opposite of Tyler O'Neill. He plays. That's all he does is just play. And I say all he does as if there's no talent there. But it is kind of a boring accumulation situation right now, as he's been at 109 and 105 WRC plus totals the last 2 years for Casty. 29 and 23 homers, 106, 86 on the ribbies, a big 20 ribby dip last year, unfortunately. 79 and 80 runs, and then 11 and 6 on the steals. The 11 was obviously a shock that nobody expected to repeat. I'll take the 6, though. Even 5 to 6 from Casty is perfectly fine. He'll be 33, like I said. Dude plays. He's no worse than 558 plate appearances each of the last 4 years, over 650 each of the last 2. Where are you these days on Nick Castellanos, Justin?
I have him kind of in a mini tier with 2 other guys that we've talked about this episode, or actually 4 other guys we talked about. Jesus. I have Riley Green, Ian Happ, Nick Castellanos, Stephen Kwan, and Christian Yelich all kind of
so some
together.
Different skill profiles within that tier too. That's interesting. So you can kind of go with what you need within that tier there. Okay. And
I do tiers by value.
Dollar value.
I don't worry about, like, you could build your roster construction whatever way you want out of that. I have him smacked in the middle of that, but he's going later than all of those guys.
Yeah, 176 ADP for Casty. I think he's priced to buy. That's a pretty fair price to get into an amazing lineup too. I still love everything that Philly's got in their lineup. He could spike back up too. Again, you don't project it. You just take it for what it is. But if he jumps back to the 3,100 with a 275, which is basically what we saw in 2023, it was 29, 106, 272. No one would be that surprised. He is 33, but the age has not shown any sort of wear down in terms of the volume, as I've mentioned. Joe, what say you about Nick Castellanos? Is he somebody that you can land on in that pick 175 range? 176?
I definitely have landed on him a few times. He's an interesting profile. Like, the hardest ball he's ever hit in his career was last season. Max EV.
Oh, wow.
Max EV is interesting. Like, I prefer 90th percentile, but it's interesting to see that, like, even though the barrel rate was at 7.9%, he's pretty much always in the 10% range. He was still able to hit the crap out of a ball at 113 last year. The hard hit at 37 is not my favorite. But I think he's still a pretty solid, well-rounded contributor. You're probably not going to get a ton of steals. Maybe, bank on 2 or 3 at this point of his career, but 20-ish homers, good runs and RBIs, batting average that doesn't really hurt you. He played 162 games last year. I think that that's something that may be tough to repeat, but I think that he's still rather interesting. Like, there's some odd things in this profile, though. Like, 21% strikeout rate with a 16% swinging strike rate. Like, he's a bit of an odd eval at this age, but I think he's still a buy.
Yeah, I got no problems paying the price point on Nick Castellanos. I don't think I've landed on him anywhere, but I'm not anti, and I can certainly get there. All right, 2 more guys. I adjusted the sheet a little bit there, took 2 others and put them for tomorrow for us, Justin, because I do have a harder out than I thought, because I didn't realize it was already 3:40. Let's talk Lane Thomas in Cleveland these days. And, I still remember when he had that big finish in Washington, and I totally bought in, and it was a stone cold flop. And then the next year was when he absolutely popped off for 28 and 20 in 2023. And so I've always held a grudge against him. Did pretty well last year. Again, a split season with Washington and Cleveland, but he ended up going 15-32. The average did dip quite a bit, 31 points down to 237. But hey, if you get in that sort of counting categories, that's not too bad. It was only 63 ribbies because he plays lower in the order, 65 runs for the same reason. First full year in Cleveland for Lane Thomas. How do we feel about that, Joe?
I don't mind it. I know a lot of people are really worried about what the steals are going to look like. Nobody steals like the Nationals. They were the number one steal team in baseball last year. Cleveland was 5th, so it's not like they're a team that just never runs. I think he can still, will he get back to the 30s? Maybe not, but I think somewhere in the mid-20s for steals. I think if we're talking about the home runs, it's probably, I don't know, maybe about 20 or so. It's interesting the point we mentioned earlier about Kwan. In terms of the left-handed power. I know he's a switch hitter, but most of his at-bats.
No, Thomas is a righty.
Is he not? Oh, I'm completely off.
Yeah, Thomas is a righty, so he's not going to benefit at all from that. I mean, maybe an Oppo Taco here and there, but that's not the kind of power that Thomas has. So he won't benefit from that at pick 1. And he's pick 180, by the way. I keep forgetting to say the ADP out front there. But
I keep thinking he was a switch hitter. I don't know why.
I have guys like that too. Bryce Elder is a lefty in my brain, no matter how much he's not. And I even watched him in college because he's a Longhorn. So there's just certain guys that you just put something in your brain.
Bryce Elder is one of those guys you don't want to watch directly. You just put him in the mirror behind you, and so you kind of forget it.
Maybe that's why. Yeah, and I think it's because his profile cuts that of like a crafty old school lefty too, right? Because he doesn't overpower, and maybe that's why my brain keeps saying, no, that guy has to be a lefty. Look at the way he pitches. But anyway,
forget about the left-handed hitter thing. But I think that he is still like a 20-ish homer, maybe a little bit under, with mid-20 steals and a decent batting average.
Okay.
I think that he's fine. I think that he's not like a massive target, but he's somebody I've landed on a couple times. 5 outfielder leagues, 15-team leagues. You need to fill bodies in that middle range, and I think you could do worse than Thomas.
And I do think Lane Thomas's playing time is super locked. I just think that Cleveland was going to play him regardless. But then somebody like Chase DeLauder, not going to come in and push the outfield. Not that he would have taken Lane's spot, but like they don't even necessarily have guys coming up ready to push. I think Thomas is absolutely locked in for as many plate appearances as he can stay healthy for. What do you think about him for his first full year in Cleveland, Justin?
Okay, so Lane Thomas last year stole 34 bases. He stole 32 bases.
Yeah.
28 of them were in Washington.
Yeah.
Like it was.
But as Joe points out, Cleveland was 5th. They don't not run, and I know it's a double negative. Like they do run over there, and it was weird. Like they dropped a lot for Lane Thomas in Cleveland.
Yeah.
But like you didn't project him for like single digits this year or anything, did you?
No. I projected him for like 17 or 18. I think.
Okay, so that's still fine.
Yeah, I project him for a 17-18 season with a 247 batting average. I think part of the problem for me, though, is Lane Thomas is also a guy who gets hurt. Like, now he's still been able to get over 500 plate appearances in each of the last 3 seasons, but he's always seemingly nicked up. I think that while the power should probably stay around where it's been or where it was last year, I don't see like another jump back into the mid-20s. I think he's a teens homers hitter. I think he's a team stolen base guy, and he is not always healthy. So like for me, like I don't know that the upside is there. I think there are some people who are still dreaming on what we saw in 2023, and I think that is the clear outlier now. So I think he's fine where he's going, but he's just not a guy I end up with.
That's kind of how I feel about Lane Thomas. I don't begrudge anybody taking him at 180 if it fits the needs that they have, but there's guys I like around there. And so I just don't really land on him. I'd actually much rather have this guy, even though I won't get the speed that Lane Thomas has. I'm pretty geeked about Jurickson Profar going out to Atlanta. I think this is a nice pickup for them. Pick 176 coming off of a huge career year, kind of out of nowhere. 31, we were kind of established, we thought we knew what Jurickson Profar was. He was an established kind of like league average and even sometimes a decent bit below. In fact, he was actually kind of running an every other year type of deal where he'd be above league average, below league average, above, below, 107, 90, 113, 87, 110, 78, and then 139 last year. So if the pattern continues, he's going to have a below average season this year. I don't quite believe that, though. He did work with swing coach. Like, he did make tangible changes to his approach and his swing to have this huge year. I'm not sure that a 139 WRC plus is going to repeat for Profar, but I do believe he can be very good again. And atop that Braves lineup, I think we could see triple digit runs. So even if he gives back some of that power, he hit 24 last year, say the average comes down from 280 to like 260, I still think we could see 100 runs. He had 94 last year. I love him atop this lineup. And I think Profar's fairly priced at pick 175. What say you, Justin?
I don't know how long he'll be on top of this lineup once Acuna comes back. Like, will that change things up? That being said, I like him more than ADP. I have him for 20 home runs, 10 stolen bases, and a 267 with good runs and RBI totals. Like, I think that I think he's one of those guys that kind of gets undervalued in the market because he's quote unquote boring. Mm-hmm. But I like boring production that I can bank on, and I feel like that is what you get from a guy like Jurickson Profar. So I'm fine with a price on Profar. I think he's a perfect glue guy for kind of your third outfielder.
I think he might just bat 2 when Acuna comes back, though. I think they just bump Acuna to the top and everyone goes down 1. I don't necessarily think he has to be coming way down. Like, he's got great plate skills. He had a 11% walk rate and 15% K rate last year. That's really sharp. 380 OBP. So if he's doing well, we'll see how he's doing in that first month plus, however long it takes Acuna to get back. But if he's popping a good OBP, again, I don't think that they have to just say, hey, get out of here. They might just say, you go down to 2. Fair. And everyone else moves down there. Joe, do you concur with Justin and I on Profar's sneaky solid value at pick 175, boringly solid?
I think he is solid with the caveat that I don't know that we really know for sure what he's going to be. I think he's kind of in the Victor Robles grouping of guys that we just never expected to break out, finally break out. And then
it's a good comp in terms of the breakout. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're going within 5 picks of each other or so. But I just don't know if this is something that's going to carry over. I think it probably does to some extent. The gains in barrel rate, hard hit rate, the swinging strike rate went down. The average exit velocity for Profar has been 85, 86 his whole career. Last year was 91. Tangible, legit changes, going to a better lineup. I'm buying in, but I'm also not jumping in with both feet. He's not like one of my most rostered players. I got a couple shares. But if he did go back to like a 100 WRC plus and he was just kind of average this year, nobody should be shocked by that either.
No, and I do agree with that. I do think there's a world where that could happen and you still get enough production for it to not necessarily like kill you, where he ends up going like 15 and 6, but enough runs and ribbies as part of that lineup to where, okay, he jumped down quite a bit from last year, but Profar doesn't kill you. So I like him, and I'm pretty eager to get him in a few spots. I've got 1 share, probably get one other and be good with it. I'm with you. I'm not trying to get him everywhere because I do like other guys in this range, but solid move by Atlanta. They have such a good lineup, and it doesn't even have Acuna yet. Like, the lineup as is right now is good, and they're going to just casually bring Ronald Acuna Jr. and slot him atop of it in a month or so into the season. So nicely done by them, per usual lately. They've just been making a lot of sharp moves. So there we go. That's Outfield Part 3. We will continue on tomorrow. Justin and I, we're gonna have to hit a bunch of these guys, so we'll go a little bit quicker tomorrow. We do have some guys that have been discussed elsewhere. I think if we're doing outfielders next week when Joe comes on, we've done something wrong.
Well, I can do a long episode tomorrow too.
So maybe we just finish it. We'll see how deep that goes. But I do have to get going. I have to do part 2 of my prospect and prospect adjacent player discussions with Eric Longenhagen. So, Joe, thank you so much for joining us. Joe, I want to talk to you offline because Justin's going to be busy next week in New York. Maybe you and I do a couple pods together without Justin.
Absolutely. Let's have some fun when the cat's
we'll talk
away.
Trash about him. No, we'll talk trash to his face. Why would we wait until he's gone to do it?
Gentlemen, we just need to make sure we're doing SP, the first part of SP, with me on Monday.
100%. 100.
We have to have the Schwellenbach hour.
Yes. Do not worry. Maybe Joe and I do something a little bit off the beaten path from position previews to make sure of that, because you have to be there for SP1 100%. Gentlemen, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will talk to y'all both later.
Take it easy.
Absolutely. You as well.